So in this webinar, we're going to talk about auctions. So I make some assumption that before this point, you've worked with donations and events because because auctions is going to tie in a bit to both of those modules. So if you haven't covered them too deeply, it's okay. Um, we'll do a little bit of review of a couple of concepts as we go, and you can always pick it up later. That's fine. So the first place where I want to start today is a little configuration. So before you have your auction, the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to create the auction event in events. So you go to events, you'll create your event like you do any other event. And so we're going to use Awesome Auction today. So here's our pre-existing event. So you're going to create your event and you'll assign attendees to it like normal, so on and so forth. But one of the things we can do for the event is we want to make sure to assign our attendees bidder numbers. So this is going to be the event, a bit of the event side. So what we can do is we can go ahead and we can click on the event in the event list. And we're going to go to table hosting and bidder number. Now, if you're using table hosting, I normally cover that in the events module, but table hosting is commonly handled in auctions. So I'm not going to cover it right now. But generally speaking, what steps you would have taken is you would have configured your table, so you would have laid out your physical tables, given them table numbers, what have you. You would have then assigned people to tables, and then you'll be able to see them in a table chart. But what we're concerned about right now is bidder number, because that's an auction-specific functionality. So here we have it, our list of attendees, and we've got a fair number of them. And so what we can do is, in this case, we've already assigned some bidder numbers, but I want to go ahead and either reassign or auto-generate them going forward. So I'm in table hosting, bidder number, and I click on the generate auto number. So the way we can start bidding numbers at a certain number. So we could say, okay, well, we're going to manually assign 1 through 17, and we want the system to auto assign everybody who's in the system. Generally speaking, though, you're probably going to start at 1. And then we can generate them by first name, last name, and household. So first name and last name basically is more of, what do we sort by? Do we sort by first name and then assign them, or sort by last name and then assign them? Household is a kind of funny one because it actually would give two people who are in a household the same number. So Eric and Taylor Metzler, being in the same household, would get the same bidder number. I'm a big fan of either using first name or last name, so let's go ahead and just use first name, and we're going to regenerate all, and we're going to confirm. Normally you would have just done the generate button, but I want to reset. And now we have bidder numbers for everybody. There's like 60 some odd people in this list, so we now have bidder numbers for everybody. So this is cool. So this means at the beginning of your auction event or before the auction event, you could actually tell people what tables and what table people they're at and their bidder number. And so we'll see in reporting how you can get that list of the table numbers and bidder numbers so that you can assign people to which. So everything else from here is just your standard event configuration, managing the attendees, assigning tables, making sure that people are paying for their tickets. So there's not too much we need to do with the event side. That's specific to events, auctions that is, excuse me. So now we segue into the donation side, and this is going to be the bulk of auction. So the first thing we need to do is we need to make sure we have a donation name to hold our auction items. So we're going to go to Donation Management, Configure. And in my demo system, I've got far more donation names than you will ever or should ever have, with a few rare cases. So don't use this as an example, it's far too messy. But in this case, I have previously set up a donation name called Auction General. So what you would do to create an auction name, donation name, is we'd click the add button like we do with any time we create a donation name, and we'd use the type of in-kind auction. So in-kind auction will be used for recording the donation and the sale of our auction items. And so there's very little configuration we really need to do. We need to specify the type and a name. I would recommend just making a name called auction items. You don't need to do auction items 2013, 2014, 2015. I would just, because we're going to specify that with the date on the donation. So you can just do auction items. Now, if you have multiple auction events in a year, you might, and they're regular events, you might consider having different donation names. But I'm a big fan of simplicity, as many of you have heard me say. So what I would recommend is just do a single donation name called auctions, or in-kind auction, or general auction, or auction, just auction. You could just call it auction. And we're not going to lock it down to a specific program, campaign, or event. We could, but once again, this is a case of generality is my recommendation. So in this case, if we were calling it something like just auctions, we'd go ahead and save and close. So in this case, I have a pre-existing one I'd like to use called auction general. I can edit it. If I edit it, you'll see that it's laid out pretty simply. Once again, just donation type and a name. So cool. Now we have a donation name to handle our auction items. Well, since we're here, I want to talk about one other thing we might want to consider configuring, and that's what's called fund a need. So fund a need donations in an auction are basically a point in the auction when you tell people that they can basically just bid on donating, they just raise their paddle for a certain amount, and that will be added to what they pay at the end of the night. So it's a way to get monetary donations outside of the general auction process. So you'll probably have levels like, you'll say, all right, everybody who wants to make a $10 donation, raise your paddle. And they raise your paddle, you write it down. And so and then next level, next level, next level, all the way up to, I've seen it up to about $1,000, which is quite generous of those few people. And so that's what's called fund a need. And so there's two ways you can handle fund a need. You can either use your general donation name, if you've got one, and create levels within that. And that's one option. Or we can create a specific donation name for fund a need. And this will come into play more later. So this is a decision that you'll want to make early on and how you want to handle it. I could see arguments either way. It's totally up to you. So if you want to clearly separate your regular general donations from your fund a need donations, use a different donation name. There's certain advantages in that you'll be able to lay out your levels more cleanly than you would trying to add it into your general donation name, especially if you already have levels in general donations. So that's another donation name you might consider creating. So fund a need. And I'll go ahead and edit that and show you. So we have gift. Fund a need's the name, no locking down, and we have levels. 100, 250, 500, and 1,000. These would probably all be exacts, not minimums. Save and close. Okay, so that's a little of that configuration. So we need to make definitely a donation name for holding our auction items. And if you're going to be doing a fund a need, then you'll probably want a donation name for fund a need. Otherwise, go ahead and repurpose your general donation. But it's going to be important that you create those levels, because those levels are going to be how we make people differentiate who's making what donations. Because the fund a need is generally, like I said, you say, all right, anybody who wants to give $100, raise your paddle. So you can't say anybody who wants to give $100 to something, because you're not going to know what that's going to be. And for purposes of making it sane for your checkout staff, you don't want that variability. So you want set levels. So that's also where the levels are going to come into play with your fund a need donation name. Okay, cool. Well, we've basically done all the configuration. We've got our event. We've created our event like normal. We've assigned bidder numbers. We've created a donation name for holding our auctions. We created auction items. We've created a donation name for a fund a need. Now we get to actually start recording donations. So let's say that a contact has given us some items. So let's go ahead and go to their record. So we're going to go to contacts, individuals, or organizations, because an organization can make a auction item donation. And let's say our good old Mrs. Abby Normal has donated some items. So let's go ahead and go to the record of Abby Normal. And we're going to go to giving details, like we would normally for a donation, and click add. So for those of you who have been entering donations to this point, this is going to be very familiar. We're just instead using a different donation name than gift or in-kind. We're using in-kind auction. So here we have, she's making an in-kind auction donation. We're putting it under the donation name auction general, and she's donating the item. She is not purchasing it. And we're going to come back to purchasing a little bit later, because after we talk about entering items, we're going to talk about making packages. But we can't make a package without items. So as with any donation, we can specify the program, the campaign, the event, the date of the donation, any gift memos, tributes, solicited, soft credits. And what will be different is this section down here for the items themselves. I totally skipped something. And I do that sometimes. I apologize. So we will come back. So we're going to finish out this donation, and then we're going to come back to some configuration I forgot about. So the first thing we do is we specify, well, what type of auction are these items for? And that's what I forgot. So you can specify auction type in configuration, which we're going to come back to. So this is a 2-letter designation so that you can differentiate, for example, what items are for your silent auction, SA for example, or your live auction, which would have probably been something like LA I would have used. So let's say that this item is for the silent auction. And then it will automatically assign an item code based on that auction item. So I previously had 2 other auction items donated into the SA auction type. Now you can totally ignore this, and you can overwrite this with your own scheme. So if you've got a list where you're tracking your own item codes, you can totally go for that instead of having the system auto-generate it. And in some ways, I kind of recommend that so you have a bit more of a feel of what's going on. And we'll talk about how to report on items so you can see what codes you've used. So item code is a unique identifier for the item. This will let you search for it later without having to know what its actual name is. So most of your items during the auction will have some sort of number, code, what have you. So that's item code. Next is the item name and description. So what is it that's being donated? So let's say that Abby Normal has donated an old phonograph. Why not? And we can put a description for it. So this is a 1867 Transylvanian phonograph. I don't know, something like that. I totally spelled Transylvanian wrong, but that's okay. So we can put a description. And then the category. So this is the other configuration thing I forgot to cover. So you can put your items into categories so that you can kind of help organize them. So this, for example, would be none of these items, but let's just pick one at random and say it's the for sale category. And then restrictions is just kind of a placeholder if there's, like, you're not supposed to sell this for any, I'm actually not quite sure it's what it's used for, to be honest, but if you've placed any restrictions on the purchase of this item. Next is the details. So what is the market value of this item? So if someone was to purchase this in the store, what would they buy it for? So something like an 1867 phonograph would probably be something in the realm of $1,000. You know, we're talking high-level antique, assuming it's working. So that is your market value. This, if I understand correctly, is what the person who donates the item gets to effectively write off on their taxes. So this will be important. Minimum bid. So what is the starting bid for this item? So something of $1,000 would probably be, well, this depends on your policies. A lot of organizations say, well, whatever it is, whatever the market value is, the minimum bid is 10% of that, or half of that, or something like that. So let's say the minimum bid is a quarter, 1/4. So the minimum bid is $250. Okay. Next, how many have they given you? Or how many have they promised to give you? So these 2 fields are for if they've given you it or if they've promised to give it to you. So generally speaking, I don't like the idea of recording an item I haven't received, but you may accept pledged items that will be delivered later. So you can put a pledge quantity. I'd recommend actually waiting off until you physically get the item, just in case they don't give you the same amount, but you can put a pledge amount. So let's say we only have one. We only have one old Victrola. All right, cool. Now, what if she gave more items? So we could then click plus and it'll save that item, and we can add another item. Or we can just hit plus and save that item. So I'm not going to go ahead and add any more items. So I'm just going to go ahead and save, and the donation be recorded. I can go ahead and acknowledge it, just like I would a normal donation. So I'm just going to go acknowledge later. Alrighty, cool. So now we have an auction item in. Well, since I skipped over it, let's back up a little bit. So you saw that we can categorize and even type auction items and auctions. So coming back here to donation management, we're going to go back into manage auctions and do a little bit more configuration. So now what we can do is totally be in the wrong spot. Wait, where am I want to be? Sorry, it's under donation management configure. We'll use manage auction later. So what we want to do is create an auction type or manage our auction types. So chances are you're going to have only two types, silent auction and live auction. So we get a short description. These ones are test. And so SA is silent auction, and you'd probably have another one for your live auction with a code of LA, maybe something like that. And this is live auction. And where do the codes start? Codes will probably start at maybe 1. What I would probably do, would start at 1. And then save and close. So this is how you create your auction types. And then auction item category is where you will create your, once it loads, categories. Hello, come on. There we go, categories. So, you might have category, we can give you a couple of different categories. So dining, what if you're doing sale, gift certificates for restaurants, for sales, which would be items that I guess could be like a buy it now. Hotel, once again, kind of a gift certificate. Kids items, photos, sports. But we could also do student art. I wouldn't put fund to need here, but you might have other categories like wine, which is a common one. Instead of student art, you might just have art. You might have any kind of category that that you might want to consider. I would probably not create too many, but totally up to you. So that's how we can create the auction item categories and the auction types. So at this point, we now have at least one auction item in the system. So what we can do is we can create packages of items. So if I go to auction packages under donation management configure, I can take items that have been given by different people and put them together into packages. So I could take that wine and those movie tickets and that dinner gift certificate, and I could put them together in a dinner date night package. So what we can do is we can create a new package, add. We need to give the package a code. So this, it won't be auto-generated like it was for items. So you're going to want to make sure to keep yours separated. And what I usually recommend is put some sort of string, like a letter character combination at the beginning. So PA for package, maybe. That's what I tend to do in demo. So I could say this is PA, 101. Either that, or if you do just use a number, start really high up. So if you know that your auction items will reach, you have 100 auction items, start your package codes at like 200 or 300, just because we have a little bit of buffer in case you get more packages. But I'm a bigger fan of doing like PA 101 or PA 1 or something like that to help distinguish packages from each other. And then next, we have package names. So I could call this dinner date night. And then once again, auction type. So this is going to be part of the silent auction. And this will be part of the dining category. And then I can do an item description and item restrictions and minimum and value and all that. But I usually like to do that second. So next, I pick the items that will be in this package. So auction items, select. And now I can go, okay, which donation name am I pulling these auctions items from? So I'm going to pull them from Auction General. And I'm not going to lock it down to any specific event. So under Auction General, not locked to any specific event, I have these items. So one of the things you can do is when you enter an item, when you specify what event it is, it means that you can actually kind of funnel, kind of narrow down your searches later by saying I only want those auction items associated to certain events. So this allows you to use one auction name, one donation name for many different events that may even overlap to help keep them differentiated, keep them separated. So in this case, I'm not going to worry about that. And I have absolutely nothing here. Well, okay. I have a whole bunch of, okay, someone's been having fun with D&D, and I bet it was me. So this will be a different package, but let's say this package is the cool mugs, a grand piano, and where's that? And the old phonograph. So I have, and it lets me know how many of each I have too. So I have 4 grand pianos, I have 6 cool mugs, and I have 1 old phonograph. And after I put these into the package, this quantity, available quantity, will decrease by 1. So I won't ever see old photograph again. And my grand piano count will be down to 3, and my cool mugs will be down to 5. So let's go ahead and submit, and I'll show you that. So submit, and here we have the items. Their market values have been calculated up and actually filled in market value for us, and the minimum bids added together, giving us our minimum bid. But we can still override this. So we might decide that, well, this is kind of an odd number. Since you're getting a package, let's round it up to 2,500. And we actually have to specify the quantity, so we have 1 each. And if we wanted to add more items, I have to pick the right auction donation name. Auction general. Oh, I haven't saved it yet. Well, once I saved it, this will be decremented. So let me go ahead and save. So if I try to do another package, okay, let me do another package so I can show you, I like to show off that feature because it helps keeps you out of trouble. So if I'm making another package, thank you. Like I said, decremented by 1, decremented by 1, and the phonograph is no longer listed because it would now be set to 0 of available. So that'll help keep you from overextending your auction items. So you won't have to worry about putting the same item in 2 different packages, for example. Okay, so that's packages. And you can create all sorts of packages. I guess that wasn't really a dinner date night, and since it had pianos and mugs and things, but we'll ignore that. So now that you have packages, now that you have individual items, now you can sell them. So up to this point, we've been doing a lot of pre-configuration, pre-event happenings. So now we're getting close to the event. We've got our event created in Nonprofit Easy. We've maybe done our table assignments. We've done bidder names and bidder numbers. And we've had people donate items. We created packages. And we've done all our configurations. So what's next? Well, there really isn't too much next. So at this point, all we have to do is we keep recording items and keep recording packages. So as we approach the night of the event, there's going to be a couple of reports that we're going to want to pull. So we're approaching the night of the event. So what we can do is we can go to reports, and we can start with some predefined reports. So if we want to see what's been donated so far, we're going to use the auction items donated report. And the other report we'll come back to later after the event. So the auction items donated report, I want to see what's been donated so far. So we can go auction items donated, donation name is, and let's say auction general, and donation from between, so we need to go back in time a bit. In fact, let's go really back in time because I know this isn't the most well configured one. And I want to see all items, generate report. And so now I see all the items that have been donated. I see their item code, item name, who donated them, first and last name, the donation name they're put under, program, campaign, what auction type they're tied to, their category, the event name that they're meant for, the date they're donated, their market value, minimum auction amount, pledge quantity, if you do pledge quantity, how many have been received, and how many are currently available. So remember with our old mugs, or our cool mugs, we've used one of them. So now we're down to 3. No, that's the grand piano, isn't it? I'm not sure where the mugs is. They're probably somewhere in here. And how many have been received if they've been pledged? Donation amount, so basically what they got to write off, and what package those items might be in. So this one's in multiple packages, and what those package codes were. Well, those are new. So this is a good report to work with before the event when you're making your packages. Maybe you've kind of lost track of an item, or you just want to see all your items in a glance. So the auction items donated report, predefined, is going to be one of your key reporting tools for auctions. Your other one will be custom reports. So we're approaching the night of the event, and we want to generate a list of our attendees, their tables, and their bidder numbers. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to custom reports. Let's go ahead and borrow one of my old reports, but normally you'd create a new report probably called, the name of your event. And we're going to use the criteria event name is, and then the name of the event. What do I call that one? Awesome auction or something like, there it is, awesome auction. Now at this point, it's because I probably want to make sure to weed out any canceled registrations. I'm going to go ahead and add another criteria, and we're going to use RSVP canceled is false. Now, one thing I want to note is when you're using event name, that's going to grab both your registrant and your attendees. And now, normally for an auction event, if someone's a registrant, they're also an attendee, but that's not guaranteed. So if you want to, and you want to make sure you're only getting the attendees and not the registrants, you can also add a third criteria that's going to be RSVP is true. So RSVP is true is saying that this person is an attendee. They've been registered as an attendee, not as just the registrant. RSVP canceled says they haven't canceled their registration or their attendee status, and event name is saying which event, so the name of your auction. And then we're going to go ahead and next step. You want all those to be true. All right, and next we're going to use the event report view. And since we're interested in the attendees, not the registrants, once it loads, computer always gets sluggish with screen shares, we're going to use the attendee view, which is the default. And most of these columns we actually don't care about. So we can probably uncheck most, if not all, of these columns. What we're really concerned about is the attendee's name. Maybe we want to know who registered them, just in case someone says, oh, I'm with the party of blah, blah. And then we want bidder number and table number at the very least, and you may even want table name in case you've named your tables. And any other information you might think is pertinent, but chances are those are the only ones you need. We can uncheck some of these custom data sets. They won't normally be checked, and do we want to include events and tours? We don't care at this point since this should only pull an event. And we do not want to group same household contacts. Well, you might want to, but I probably wouldn't. And save and preview. The reason I wouldn't want to do that is so that I can, if I had given myself the first name and last name column, I could have sorted by last name, but I forgot to do that. But here I have it, my bidder numbers. So this is something you could have ahead of time if you want, depending on how you, so this is where it gets into how you handle your auctions. I worked with an organization not long ago who I really liked how they did it. They actually had a packet set up ahead of time for each bidder that had their brochure, their bidder number and table information, and their for the live auction, their bidder paddle, all put together in a packet, and they're in folders that had the bidder numbers all in order, so that at the front desk, they could go, okay, this person's bidder number, blah, and they could just pull out the person's whole packet and hand it to them. And it had all the information they needed for that night. They knew what their bidder number was for live and silent auction. It was pretty well organized. And then at the end of the night, we would actually put all the receipts and stuff into the individual folders in the file boxes they had, and that was able to keep everything nice and tidy. I liked that, but your organization may have a different procedure. So this is where things are kind of going to start getting a little dependent on your procedure, but this is probably a report that you will want either before the event or even at the event, so that you can see who bidder numbers are, and if there's any, if you accidentally give someone the wrong bidder number, you can check it. So this is one of those important reports. And to back up just a step for everybody's reminder, the auction items donated will be an important pre-event report. And we're going to come back to the auction item packages sold for the post-event reporting. So, all right, the night of the event has come, and people are starting to check in. So how do we want to handle that? Well, what we can do is we can go to Donation Management, Manage Auctions, and we have a check-in screen that is really cool. So what you'd probably do, this is what we did at the other event that I actually attended and helped with, was I think we had like 4 people with laptops and a wireless connection, so that's important. A good wireless connection is my recommendation. And we brought up this screen. So this is your check-in and check-out screen. So the night of the auction, this is your home base. You may have someone who's actually in the event itself, double checking registrations, making adjustments, maybe changing bidder numbers if there's been a mistake, things like that. But this is where your check-in and check-out people. So for check-in, what you can do is first we do a little bit of configuration of this screen. So we can go ahead and go to Configure Manage Auction Settings and click on that. And we say, okay, all of our auction items are coming out of what donation name? Auction General. What event is this? This is the, this is totally out of order, isn't it? The Awesome Auction. And our donations will be considered to be donated on this date. Our default mode of payment should be what, if anything? Chances are it's going to be credit card. Our donations will be linked to a program or campaign, just like any other donation, and our Fund a Need donation name. So that donation name we created at the beginning, if you're doing a Fund a Need, which as a reminder, a Fund a Need is when instead of making, someone hands you a check, here's a donation, that's a general donation. You'll have during your live auction at the end, well, you'll go up and you say, okay, now we do the Fund a Need portion. And you say, everybody who wants to do a $10 donation, raise your paddle. You record those names. Everyone who wants to do a $20 donation, raise your paddle. So that's Fund a Need. So you will have created a donation name for that, or maybe recycled your general donation name, depending if that made sense. And this is where you specify that donation name. And so it's going to pull those levels, and we'll show how to do that a bit more. And then if we're going to group with pending deposits, all of the payments and the payment date. So these will probably be the same date. And then we save. And so now we don't have to set that for the rest of the night every time. So that helps speed us up a little bit. So for the rest of the night, we can assume that all transactions are credit cards and so on and so forth. All right, so how do we use this? So you're sitting there at the front desk with a handful of other folk, probably, depending on how big the auction is, and someone comes up and they say, my name is blah-de-blah. So what you can do is under attendee, you can go, let's see, I think Abby Normal is in here. Oop, come on. So, okay, we have an Abby Jensen. So let's go with that. Someone says, my name's Abby Jensen. So you type in Abby Jensen and you select it. Now it turns out I have 2 Abby Jensens as an attendee, but that's okay. That's an issue of configuration of demo set systems being a mess. So we have Abby Jensen. We can even tell her, oh, your bidder number is 8. Get the packet for bidder number 8. The person getting the packet gets the packet, or however you handle it. And then for the event check-in, you can say check in. So now in the event, if you're familiar with the fact that you can check people into an event, the person is now checked in. So now you know the person actually showed up if you report on it later. And from here, you can simply save as draft. Now, if you want to, you can actually put their credit card on file. So if you have a card swiper, and if you're curious about what ones they are is it the M150 is the card swiper for auction for right now? Hold on. Taylor? The card swiper was the M150, right? Yeah, it was. I'll go ahead and put in when I put the webinar up, I'll get you the exact model that we're currently using for card swiper, but it's a USB swiper. So you just plug it into a USB port and it lets you actually swipe the card and it will put in the card information here. I think someone's sending me the, yes. So I will send you, looks like MagSafe magnetic interface. And I think it's also has the designation of M150. I'll put both a link to an Amazon, I got an Amazon link here, I can show it to you. Actually, let me go ahead and pull that up. And I'll show you the proper card swiper. Paste and go so that you have a sense of what it looks like. So this is the card swiper. So this is the one that we're using. Magtech, blah, 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 all that. So I'll go ahead and put that information up with the webinar, but just kind of get a sense of what it looks like. So you can use that card swiper. So you'll just click in here, swipe the card, and it enters the information, and then you'd add this card on file and set as default. And so what this means at the end of the night, you have the person's card already, so they just come up and say, I want to check out, and you just process them, and we'll show you how that works. And then we will go ahead and save as draft. So we're not going to save any of these payment details up at the top, that's fine, and save as draft. And so what this means is we can go ahead. What did I do? I shouldn't have had to. Is it save as draft? What did I do? I did something wrong. Why is it? Oh, yeah, I'll look into that. Not sure why it's yelling at me about that, but normally that wouldn't come up. But you do save as draft, and you'd be able to. Am I missing something? Hold on one second. My apologies. I got that a little backwards. I run that night the checkout. So I actually, instead of doing the the credit card and entering it there, you'd actually do add new card, and you'd enter it in here and then click add. So my apologies, everyone. Like I said, I did the checkout that night, not the check-in, so my brain was in the wrong place. So you do add new card, and then you can swipe the card and add it on file. And that way, when people do the checkout, they'll already have the card information. So you wouldn't even have to do save as draft. So all you do is add new card, move on to the next person. And so you'd reset and add new. And that would reset it for the next person, and we'd pick another person, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's the check-in process. Sorry, I made it a bit more complicated than it was. So we find our attendee, and then we would add a card on file and check them in. Okay, so our night's progressing as we go along. So as the night progresses, for a little while there's not much to do. We're just handling our night. But then we close our silent auction, for example. So what we did that night was we brought all the bid sheets in to the checkout folk. And what they did was they would use the bidder number on the bid sheet to look up the person and add the item to their purchase. So for example, bidder number 8 made a donation, bid on something. We'd bring up Abby Jensen again. That's our bidder number 8. And we'd add an item to her. Why is it not showing? What happened to the ones I configured? Oh, I didn't tie it to an event, that's why. Normally you'd tie it to an event. And so we can say the Tome of Wisdom was purchased by Abby Jensen. So we add that to hers. We say that she got one of them, and she bid. Where's my market value on this thing? Market value 5,000. So she bid 5,500, let's say. Cool. All right. And then we'd save as draft. That's when we use save as draft. That's why I was so stuck on it. And then we'd move on to our next item. And we say, okay, this was bidder number 10, which is Adam Frank. And then we'd add an item to Adam's Franks, and so on and so forth. So you'd probably have like 2 to 3 people doing this, depending on your size of your event, so that while you might be doing your live auction, or everybody's having dinner or what have you, you're now having people put in ahead of time before checkout all the items. So your goal here is to have a speedy crew that are entering in the items as quickly as they can, accurately, and making sure to keep an eye on any bidder buy it nows. And I totally forgot to show you how to print bidder sheets, so I'm gonna have to back up and show you that. So you'll keep doing that as you go along. In addition to that, you might have another person as the live auction. So as the live auction then starts happening, you'll do the same thing. You'll have a runner going from the live auction back to your entry people saying, this bidder number bought this item. So you then again go, okay, so once again, Frank, okay, so we have Frank, purchase number, and maybe we don't have an item description. All we have, I should have set it up not on an auction like that. Oh well, a bidder code. So we know that it was item 3. We can search for 3. There's 3. Armor of Frost, add it. And then save as draft. That helps her put a quantity. And he paid 700. In addition, I forgot to mention this on the event, if you're selling other items with the event, these are things like wine glasses. And so normally these would be sold with the event registration itself, but if you want to, you can sell those other items with their auction purchase. So in this way, if we had a summary test, which normally this would be something like wine glass, and so we could add a quantity to that. And if we wanted to, we could also add a funded need at this time. But I don't normally recommend doing it this way, because you're not going to know your funded needs, one at a time. You're going to know them in a big bulk. So let's go ahead now and save and draft this one. Okay, so we got Adam. So we've got some crew who are entering these in. And now we've gotten to the end of the live auction. So now they're going into dessert and speeches and fun things like that. And we've handled our fund of need. So someone comes back with a piece of paper saying, okay, on level 1 funded needs, $10, all these bidder numbers, and all these bidder numbers to the next level, and so on and so forth. And so what you can do is you can go to fund a need, and you can say, for contribution funded need level 1, here's our amount, and start picking your contacts. So I could say, okay, Abby Jensen, add, ooh, why is that blank? I'll get that fixed. Adam Frank, add, I didn't click on it, did I? I didn't. Okay, add. And so you'd go down your list of people for that level, and then you'd save as draft, and then you pick your next contribution level, go through that list, save and draft. And so this way, you can have also all your funded needs ready. So at this point in your process, in your auction, it's all about having a good fast crew that can get in all the auction items that have been purchased ahead of time, so that when we actually do the checkout, everything's ready to go. Person just walks up and gives you the money. So let's say our auction crew has finished. They have entered in all the funded needs, all the auction items, everything that needs to be done. So your checkout crew will once again be on the auction purchase screen. So at this point, they're on this screen, and Abby Jensen walks up and says, okay, so you might ask, for their name or their bidder number. I myself liked asking for bidder number because it was easy to search by. So I'd be like, bidder number, she'd say 8. There she was. But sometimes people would say a name. Totally up to you. So she'd go Abby Jensen, and I'd be like, okay, there you are. You've been checked in, and I've used a card on file, or maybe they forgot to get a credit card from her, and so now we get a credit card, or maybe she's decided to pay by cash or check, and we get that information. So, okay, she's paying by check. We're allowed to take checks from people, and ta-da-da-da-da. Here's the auction items. Here is the funded need. And here, and at this point, if we wanted to, we could add, she's like, oh, I'm going to buy that wine glass. You could add it on the wine glass. And if you want to do any soft credit, you can at this time. So you could soft credit the spouse if you wanted to. And, we're basically ready to go. And then we can just go ahead and check out. Oh, payment date. What did I do wrong with payment date? Payment date must be earlier or the same as the current date. Oh, so we can't pay in the future. That's okay. That was a configuration fault on my part because I put the date of the event. Okay. Check out. And then if we have a printer on hand, we can go ahead and print or email an invoice. I recommend email for an invoice, but if you want to have them print and sign it, you can do that too. We did that the night I did the auction. I personally thought it was a little cumbersome, especially since we ran out of paper, I think, at one point. But it is nice if you've got people who have had a little too much festivity that night and you're concerned they may not actually remember that they purchased things from you. So it's a good idea to have people, a good idea to print and have people sign an invoice for your records. That actually happened to us that night, so that's why I mention it. We had someone who partied a little too hardy, and so we had to have her sign to acknowledge that she actually did purchase stuff. Got a lovely purse out of the night though. So, but emailing at the very least so that they have a copy, and then close, and it resets, and we do it again. So because I'm explaining, it seems rather sluggish, but we could actually get through a person pretty quickly as long as their card was in good shape, or we already had a card on file. That was even better. Now, another thing you can do is if you've had someone who comes up, so let's say Adam Frank has came up, he gave you some information, added some items, and then so, oh, I left my card in the car. So you can save his draft again, and if you want to, you can pull up his draft easily this way. So you don't have to go searching for him. You can always see who's has items outstanding. So if you at the end of the night have people who haven't finished purchasing their items, you'll see them in this cart here. So if you've entered in items for them but they haven't yet purchased them, you'll still be able to find them by going view drafts. So I can click on the draft and pull it up. And you can see what items they have, and that way you'll never lose an item. Another thing to mention is that as you put items into people's carts, it will reduce the number of items available again, so that you don't have to worry about accidentally selling the same item to two people. So good times there. Okay, so at this point, the night's over, but there's always a little bit of cleanup. So the first thing I want to do is actually back up a little bit because I forgot a step, and that was generate bidder sheet. So before the night even started, you wanted to generate your bidder sheets. Now you could have created your own bidder sheets in Word or in OpenOffice or something like that, but you could have also had Nonprofit Easy generate your bidder sheets. So you would say the donation name and the auction event. Once again, I didn't do that correctly when I was doing my example, but here's all the items. So you would say how many you want to print and what the bid increase is. So if something like a $5,000 market value that starts at 2,000, your increments will probably be something like 100, maybe even 200. And so you just check that. You say you want to print one and not reset and generate. And then what you can do is you can either you can select this event, so that'll say on the bid sheet, but I don't care too much about that. And then you can either do a 1-page or 2 per page bidder sheet. So if you want nice big, 8.5 by 11 bidder sheets, do the 1 per page. If you want narrower bid sheets, which is going to save on paper, but you're going to have to cut them, then use the 2 per page. Let's go ahead and use the 1 per page, and we can either do it as a Word document, which will let you edit it. So if you like our template for the most part, but you like to make little tweaks, go for it. Use the Word or PDF. Let's go ahead and use PDF. Generate bid sheet. And we'll open up our PDF. And it's blank. It should not be blank. Why was it blank? Let me try that again. Hold on a second. Known bug. So if that does happen, you just do it again and it should work. I thought they fixed that. There it is. So here's our bit sheet. And you can configure this template in, of all places, configuration, or is it email notifications. So there'll be a bidder sheet option in email notifications. I know it's not really an email, but that's where we tossed it. And you can configure that template, modify fonts, sizes, add more rows, things like that. So, okay. So our auction event's over. That was what we would have done before the event. And so now what do we do? Well, we have some people who are trickling in to buy items. We might have corrections to be made, and most of the corrections can be done like any other correction, editing a donation. Well, let's do a little reporting first. So let's see what's been sold and what's been bought. So we can go to reports, predefined reports, auction items / packages sold. And so this is going to tell you who bought what your items and packages were, that were sold at the event, and to whom. So if someone says, you know, should I have, if someone want, if another staff is like, I can't remember who we sold something to, and you need to check something, for example, we can do donation is auction general, and let's just keep it broad so I can make sure to get as much stuff as possible. General generate report. Normally that wouldn't have been such a broad date range, but I want to make sure I get results. And here are the option items. So a sarcastic parrot with item code 3 was donated by Adam Evia and was purchased by Alex Redis. And we have Alex's information, the donation name it's under, the program, campaign, auction type, category, all that information. So this is a good way to check, what's been done when the event is over. And once again, you can still use the other auction items donated to see what's been donated. So you can do comparisons, you can double check things. So those two reports are going to be your two reports. Those are going to be your go-to reports. And at this point, they should cover all the information you need. And once again, like I said, if you want to double check to see if you've left anything in the carts, anything saved as draft, you can go back to manage auctions, check the drafts. So yeah, so now your event's over. Well, I want to make sure to let you know how you can do individual auction sales outside of manage auction. So let's say that there was an item that got overlooked. Somehow it fell underneath the printer or something. And so let's say that at the event, Abby Jensen bought another item, and we forgot to include it in the original donation. Well, that's okay. We can still sell that item like we would normally sell, or we would normally record a donation. So we can go to Giving Details, click on Add, and we can pick the donation name, auction, where did I put it? Oh, I have to pick the right type. Auction General, and instead of doing that, we're donating an item, we're purchasing an item. And this will be very reminiscent of what we did on that check-in screen. We're going to select our item, and we're going to pull it up by code. So we can go, okay, I know it was item code 2. Let's see, do I have any 2? I have 2 2s, but ignore that. It was the golf dinner. All right, I have 3 of those available, so good, submit. And then I can specify, okay, so she bought 1 of them, and she bought it for $2,000. And then like any other donation, we can do checkout and process. If we also want to tack on fund to needs, things like that, we could have done add to cart, but let's keep it simple. And just like any other donation, how did they pay, process. So that's the other way you can do auction items. So if you don't want to do a checkout that night, this is probably what you would do. Although you could have used the manage auction page to do a checkout after the effect. But if you have individual items that need to be handled, that got overlooked that night, this is how you'll handle them. So let's see here. I think that might be everything. So any questions?